I'm a teacher at McKinney Boyd High School. I teach AP US History. The passion, I guess, derived from that is the idea to change kids' lives. People say, well, how do you coach football yet you have this, love-hate relationship with the idea of head injuries? And I'll never ever say that any of my coaches forced me to do anything. This was all my own, personal decision to do things. Well, all the coaches have to be certified as far as this whole concussion aspect. The protocol is very, very cumbersome, but very detailed to ensure the child's safety.
Concussion is a closed head injury, and it involves the disruption of normal brain function. Your brain is suspended in the cerebrospinal fluid. Most concussions, the working theory is, happen when your skull stops, whether another player hits you and you stop moving forward, or when your skull hits the ground, and the brain continues to accelerate. It's kind of like when you get into a car accident and the front end of your car stops, but your body keeps moving forward until you hit the seatbelt, hopefully, or the dashboard, unfortunately. And the injury can happen when your brain itself hits the inside of your skull. I think the biggest thing we've done is improve our understanding of concussions and their severity. I think we've gotten better diagnosing them. There's been a big push in improving techniques, tackling, blocking, things like that. But really, it's making sure you can't go back in the game when you get a concussion.
The rules have been evolving and changing for the better. And that's going to continue to do so. The hard part to think about is we don't want to take away, the idea of what football is. There's certain pride in the sport, the idea of you being able to run full speed into another human being and allow nobody to get hurt to an extent. But if anything, we always preach about the idea of how this game, team environment, gets you prepared for life, and the idea of going against obstacles and overcoming them.
Colin, as a child, was always very competitive. Winning was very important to him. He was a gymnast. He played soccer or Little League Baseball. He played tennis. He played golf. And then he found football.
My father, he was a big football fan. And we used to go to high school games as a kid. The idea of playing high school football was, very, very glamorous. Once I got involved, especially going my sophomore year, transitioning into a varsity player, I think just fell in love with the game. I grew up playing defense primarily because my dad was a defensive player, and so I didn't start playing offense, which is what I'm predominantly known for, till my sophomore year in high school when I played slot receiver, and then in college I got recruited as a slot receiver. A couple weeks before signing day, John Ware had just gotten, the coaching position at Missouri Southern, and his offense coordinator came down to Texas last minute, convinced me to go up there to visit. I went and visited. I was really kind of unsure about that decision process, but he really gave me the big picture of the idea of we're building it with your class that's coming in. Like, this is what it's going to be. You're going to be helping build the foundation, because I think they went 2-8 the year before. And so signing day came, and I signed my life away, it felt like, to Missouri Southern.
Missouri Southern Lions, they're led by first-year head coach Bart Tatum, who has led the Lions to a 3-0 start. Their main player so far has been Colin Beto, a junior wide receiver.
There you see he's 175 pounds, but he don't play like it. He's got one of the mentalities where I don't care how big I am, I'm going to catch the ball no matter what.
Being only 5'7", you have to have that mentality if you want to be a star at the D2 level.
The records I have at Southern are single season and then most career receptions. I know I led the nation when I was a junior. What's funny is I didn't catch a single ball my first game my senior year, and I was like, oh great, this is gonna be a great year. But then after that, right, everything just picked up and went right back into place.
See if White Hand Speeder can do. He has Beto open across the middle.
He's gonna pass it.
Henspeter to Beto, and that's a touchdown. Couldn't quite keep up with Beto there. It's tough.
Colin Beto, senior wide receiver from McKinney, Texas, mentioned time and time again that Beto, one of the best receivers in Missouri Southern history. Not only that, but one of the best receivers in all of Division II.
He definitely is. He's a deep threat as well as just solid hands. You knew when you throw his way and it's around him, he's going to haul it down.
Finished off really well, and personally, but more importantly, is I think the big picture of athletics in general is we had the first winning season in a long time my senior year.
Last couple weeks, we've seen some really good running back action.
And there's the pass complete to Beto.
Takes a shot.
Got hit hard.
The thing is, people always equate this idea of concussions with just football. The first time I was knocked unconscious, I was in 4th grade.
During a gymnastics practice, he was practicing on the high bar and his hand slipped and he hit his head on the high bar. So that literally knocked him out. He had 9 staples in his head. And you know, the interesting thing is, he never told me about any other concussions. That was not a common discussion. Gee, Mom, I really, got my bell rung on the field during this game or that game. So we really didn't talk about it. And it wasn't something we were extremely aware of.
I think there was a lack of understanding the severity of it. I think we've seen in the last 15 to 20 years, unfortunately, the long-term effects of multiple concussions and the chronic problems that athletes have. I would tell you 10 or 15 years ago, if the player told you they were fine, they went back in the game, almost no questions asked.
I think the unfortunate thing was, in those years, it was more important to be tough.
There's a hiding aspect of it, because you do know when you've had a concussion that you're not quite right. There is also the aspect, though, that they may not know that. So there's the conscious hiding, and then there's the unconscious aspect of it, that they're not really aware that they're goofy. The kids want to play.
It may seem foolish, macho, ridiculous. I don't really know. It's one of those aspects I just grew up with. The idea if you can still go, you can still play.
This is Beto. Beto carrying his tackler across the 40-yard line to the 33.
And then obviously things, me being just overly aggressive probably throughout the time, and then being very, very physical football player. And I think that's one thing that anybody who's played with me can always attest to is I was always a very physical football player, and I think that obviously didn't help me out too much. I finished that fall in 2008, and the economy was on its lowest of lows, right? The Great Recession. And so I had a job lined up for me that summer, and then all of a sudden in November, December, they said, well, instead of hiring, we're actually going to lay off over 1,000 employees. So I had no idea what I was going to do.
Colin came back to Dallas after graduation and got a job working for a company here in Dallas as a sales rep, and that was not his thing.
I ended up trying to sell paper products, I use the analogy of being part of The Office, you know what I mean, the television show. I did that for 2.5 weeks, hated it every single day, it was awful. So I talked to my brother and he said I can get you an internship in DC.
He had gotten a job with a company in DC, marketing.
And as much as I love the political consulting aspect of getting to go to the Hill, and everything has this political spin to it, and I really enjoyed that. It's kind of why I'm passionate about it today. I hated being in a cubicle, right? I hated being in the confines after being an athlete. So I did that for about 6.5 months.
He had decided then that he wanted to go to culinary school instead of grad school. And he went to school in San Francisco.
I was so enamored by the idea of what you can do and create with food and how it can bring people together. I just started eating at all these restaurants, spending what money I had. One day I ate at a restaurant called A16, and I loved the authenticity of it. And so I walked up to the chef, her name was Chef Liza Shaw at the time, and I said, hey, can I come and stage? It basically means just come in and hang out and figure out the ways of the kitchen for free for a day. She said, yeah, come in. One thing led to the next, and I got a job there.
The world of cooking has been made very glamorous by the Food Network, and it really isn't that in real life for most people, not until you get to be somebody like Bobby Flay. Especially as you're working your way up, your head chef is yelling at you constantly, and there's a lot of pressure.
I worked at A16 for about a year and a half, and then I moved to another restaurant called Francis. From there, I worked there for about 6 months, and then that's when I kind of started to fall off the map a little bit because of some social issues, or internal psychological issues, I guess would be more appropriate to say.
The depression was creeping up on him. On his day off, he would call and he was just struggling to get up. And he seemed to have this sense of, I know I should feel happy, but I just can't get there. That continued for months.
The hardest part is me trying to disguise it. And by me disguising it caused me to alienate myself more and more and to kind of take myself out of the equation. And it's just, yeah, it's just hard to put into words.
I think part of the issue also is when you move into a new city and you're working in that world, a lot of times when you're off, your friends are working. And so you find yourself alienated to some degree.
So especially after getting off of work, being in this industry, I live about 2 miles from this particular restaurant. And so it's 12, and then on Fridays or Saturdays, maybe it's 1 in the morning. The public transportation, I may be able to get on the train or maybe able to get on one bus, but most of the time I'd end up walking over a mile home, so I'd be listening to music, and it's like the most lonely environment, yet you're surrounded by people. It's very surreal and kind of hard to explain, but just kind of getting lost in yourself and really having that conversation, having a lot of time to think about really what are you doing and what is your purpose. And it's really, really, really hard to explain because you feel so selfish, or at least I do, when I try to help people understand why like suicide is an option.
May, I had gone on a trip to Cabo with some friends, and we were flying back to Dallas, and as soon as we land on the runway, as we're taxiing back to the gate, like we always do, turn on your phone, and I have all these text messages to go through, and so I get a message from him that was basically I'm done, I can't do this anymore. I was frantic, needless to say. And I couldn't get in touch with him because he wasn't answering his phone. I called the restaurant and no one was answering at the restaurant. And so I finally called the doorman of the apartment where he was living, and Tim said, I saw him this morning. So that was a relief. So I got on the next plane and flew back to San Francisco. I was there for weeks because he had told me that he thought about walking in front of a bus.
I was basically on suicide watch. They'd come pick me up to work. They'd take me to work. I was basically a little kid again. I had to take FMLA, right, Family Medical Leave Act, and stop working. And I started to go to see a psychiatrist, which probably wasn't the best thing for me because I started getting loaded up on drugs like crazy. They started giving me like antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, like give me benzodiazepines, which are like the most addictive thing. And I had no idea, right? I was like, I'm sick, I need to get better. Just putting stuff in my mouth.
I could tell as the weeks went by, things were not improving. So I contacted a therapist I know and said, can you give us some recommendations for help? And she said, if I were in your shoes, I would take him to a live-in place called Sierra Tucson. As a family, we interviewed their liaison here in Dallas. We met with her because it really does affect the whole family, a situation like this. And we decided that we needed to do an intervention. It was the most difficult thing we've ever done. I think I could say that for all of us.
Of course, you always want answers as far as to why you are the way you are, and don't get me wrong, there's other psychological issues there too, but finally, when I was at Sierra Tucson, they were able to SPECT scan my brain and really look at brain flow. When they came back with the images, they're basically in this written report, just fully the idea of like, this is what your brain looks like. It's supposed to look very smooth, and yours is not.
As you look at this, there are areas of the brain that don't look symmetric. A healthy brain in a younger person should essentially show fairly symmetric processing. It shouldn't have either dead spots. It shouldn't have areas where there are increased uptake or decreased uptake. In the medical terms, focal issues, specific spots in your brain probably shouldn't look that different.
On the one hand, it's frightening because he, at the time, was only 27. And you're thinking, gosh, he has to live it the rest of his life like this, right? But on the other hand, you at least can understand it. So the thing that Sierra Tucson did for him and for us was help him understand some coping mechanisms, what he has to do to manage his life, probably for the rest of his life.
At the same time, it almost makes you feel like you have a handicap, you know, and obviously I'm fully functioning right now, and nobody would know this otherwise. But you know, I do have a lot of issues with memory. But that was the breath of fresh air to know that it wasn't just me about my depression and suicidal tendencies and all that, but also could have been exacerbated because of my head trauma. So I'm living in LA, and I was in Beverly Hills. You know, I had an address at 90210. It's pretty awesome. Feeling pretty good about myself. I thought about going to USC to get my social work degree, and I just realistically, it wasn't feasible. And so I talked to my parents, and I called my head coach, who's the athletic director now of McKinney. We talked about what I can do, really, what can I do to give back, or what can I do to, you know, kind of feel like I'm playing a bigger role in other people's lives and making a difference. And he said, well, you ever thought about teaching and coaching? I moved back to McKinney. I started observing in classrooms from my old teacher when I was in high school. I was there all the time. In the mornings, I would go and hang out all 3 high schools, primarily Boyd, to work with the football programs. And then for 2 weeks, I got my alternative certification. Coach Drake calls me. He's like, "We have a position available. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" I was like, "I will be there." The rest is history. So Nico brings up a really astute point, right? He says this idea of the Monroe Doctrine that we kind of brought up yesterday. So John Quincy Adams, our future president in 1824.
Colin will always have to be aware of symptoms. He takes fish oil. That's what the doctor recommended. Do we think it's helping? Who knows? However, it can't hurt.
What's really honestly helped me is the idea of trying to help others. Realistically, I didn't really have the best time when I was in high school, like from an internal standpoint. So that's kind of like why I got back into this, especially with juniors, because it's such a tumultuous time in their life as they transition to adulthood. So that's kind of my therapy, is helping them out, more so in the classroom, not just on the football field.
Athletics are so beneficial for kids, for adults. Colin and I have had this conversation, just recently. He said to me, given what I know today, I'm not sure I would do it differently. I love football. I loved football. That desire and drive to be on the field, it's incredible.
Oh, Colin! Oh, he goes! Run, Colin!
The biggest thing is teaching the kids to be competitive, and the importance of competition in one's life to push you to become a better person. If things are as status quo and you're comfortable, then you should really be fearful. Because if you're comfortable, then you're not getting the best out of yourself. That's why we preach competition on and off the field, and I think the most important competition is with yourself. I think that's one of my driving factors, is how every single day, how can you become a better version of yourself. But that's about it, I think. It's fundamental.